Yeah, I'm just starting the YouTube.
So we're going to call us to order at 7:02. And again, thank you everybody for being here tonight. It's been a little while since we've seen each other. Everybody's all set with an agenda. You got all your paperwork that we've been sending out to you? I guess that's a yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Brett is talking when he's saying.
Brett, you were
Sorry, I
muted,
was
so if you
just
were-
saying, I don't get the agenda sent to me. I reached out to Antoinette today. So she's gonna look into it with IT because it says I'm on the email list. I get everything that Christine, you sent out, all the backup information, but for some reason I don't get like the agenda or
I'll start
that
sending the
initial
agenda.
email.
Yeah, I'll send the agenda with the materials just so everybody gets everything at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any public on?
Yes.
Are there any public comments at this point? We're on agenda item number 2, public comments.
If you wish to comment, unmute yourself and start talking.
I just want to say hi. Hi, folks.
Anita?
Hi, Nita.
Okay, I'm not hearing any other public comments. So we'll go on to agenda item number 3, which has got 3 parts to it. So it's Board of Selectmen, and we're looking for a project update on Boom Bridge.
Okay, so Nita, I'll take this one. So we attended a progress meeting via Zoom this week to find out what was happening. So they're a little bit behind schedule, so they're working 9 to 10 hour days and Saturdays so that they can catch up. They anticipate the bridge being open the first week of December.
Okay. Well, that's good news.
Yeah, I think the delays relate to the ability to get raw materials because of COVID.
Right. I mean, we've been having balmy weather, but we are moving towards winter, as much as I hate to say the word. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why they're working the Saturdays and the 9 to 10 hour days.
And has the status updates been on Mike's updates weekly?
No, because this was the first meeting that we attended.
Okay.
So
I
he
was gonna
should,
say I had not heard.
he should have it on his when you and I spoke about talking about Boom Bridge, I asked him if he had an update and he told me he was attending a meeting on Tuesday and I could come too. So
Okay, good. Mike, Mike Anderson, I just looked up and I saw your glamour shot and I'm just like. Very nice. Brett, I noticed you're not using your.
Hey, no, I'm live tonight.
Live. All right. So that's Boom Bridge. Second part of that agenda item is talking about the school modernization project closeout from the finance side. And we've sent out some information, but I'm going to turn it over to Christine. And it's all good news.
So on Friday, we'll be closing out the third USDA loan that we have for the school project. So the loan amount, which was in your materials that came out this afternoon, is $3,934,510. The annual payment is $178,745, and we have a lower interest rate on this one at 2.125%. So our total loan amount for the project is $21,934,510 with an annual payment of $1,067,765, which is just over 2 mil. It's 2.02 mils for anyone who is calculating that. So.
And that puts our average interest rate being paid at 2.633. So just incredible. And for those that can remember, going back, we had always been forecasting a little over 24 million to be financed. So as you can see, we're financing under 22 million. And that we had projected that we would be just a bracket somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 mil in order to pay for this project. And as Christine brought out, we're, a smidge over 2 mil. So that's good news, and that's something that should go out to the community.
Yes.
So, any questions on that? Yes, Brett?
With the closeout, does that also transition the middle school back to the, is that officially done now where the middle school is officially back with the town? Or is that still in
That's a
school?
completely separate issue from the financials that we're talking about right now. This is just with the new school project. Anything with turning over the old school that has to do with steps the Board of Education needs to take first.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, needless to say, the town should be proud for what has transpired. I mean, the school modernization project committee did a great job. But if we hearken back to where we were in terms of going over all the hurdles, successfully having a referendum, we've come in with, I think, almost more than what we promised in terms of a project that's come in under budget and in terms of mitigating the tax burden to the town, but also showing just I think an immense investment in our town. So very pleased. All right, C, which is an appropriation request from Board of Selectmen.
So Nita, I think you wanted to speak on this one?
Yes, I think, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I think at the last meeting, we had mentioned that we had found, I think that we had found the group that we wanted to have come back for the grant that we got. We did get the grant. And then what has to happen now is that before we had 4 companies that we heard from, all excellent, 2 of whom had worked for us before in other projects. But we chose a 4th one, which is called Lothrop. And they have wonderful amounts of work that they have done for historic buildings and are very enthusiastic about the $20,000 and advising us for the 2 things we want to know, which is how could we best use the building, and also are there other things that need to be done to the building to make it safe and attractive. And as you all know, we did put quite a bit of money into the building this year in the spring, $27,000, which was for painting, which made a huge, huge difference to the whole place. So we're really looking forward to this. And what I understand about the appropriation is that we have to put out the $20,000 first. And then at the end of it's probably going to be 2 months of work that we will eventually get it back from the town, from the State Historic Preservation Office in Hartford. So it's a $20,000 amount. Any more questions?
We're looking to put $20,000 into C335, which is the 1750s house capital line. And as Nita said, this is we've already secured the grant funds from SHPO. Typically, they have a matching requirement. They have suspended the matching requirement for this fiscal year. So it would be $20,000 that is given to the town for this project. No matching, no money out of our pockets, but we are required to do this additional appropriation request because it was not something that was budgeted in the FY 2021 budget. This one will have to go to a town meeting because it's a $20,000 appropriation. So the Board of Selectmen approved this at their meeting last Tuesday. It will go through you. Then at the Selectmen's meeting next Tuesday, we will figure out the process from there for the town meeting. Additionally, we are looking for authority to use the grant funds that we've gotten for the technical assistance for the housing plan. So that's a $4,500 additional appropriation to B3409, which is the affordable housing line item within land use. This is the housing plan that needs to be updated, and we would be working with the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments to get the work completed. Again, this is a grant. These are grant funds. There is no matching requirement, nothing that the town needs to pay. This is just giving us the ability to use the free money.
Okay, so just so that you understand, I mean, the money comes out of our unassigned and is put into these line items, but will be paid back as it's completed and inspected.
Yes, and both of these projects will be completed this fiscal year, so we will be reimbursed this year.
I have a question, if that's okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
Dan. Am I supposed to rate? I don't know the procedure. I tried to Google the John Dean Gallup House, so I didn't have to ask this question. But what's the purpose? Like, what's it for?
Well, Sarah, when we bought that property that it's on, the 104 acres, et cetera, that the house is on, the house and a couple of other buildings came with it, including the restaurant out on Route 2 is part of the property also. And at the time we bought it, there were people who were still involved with Mystic Seaport, which had owned all of this, and that's whom we bought it from. And we allowed those people to stay for quite a long time. However, it became clear a couple of years ago now that the house was really not being well taken care of, and it needed some work, okay? And it is considered, it is a historic house, and it is in the Connecticut ledger for being that. And everyone has suggested to us we should also be looking at putting it in the federal kind of historic material. So we would like to, that's why I said, in addition to looking at the building and seeing what else needs to be done in it now so that we could get it useful, we are looking for these people to also share with us the feasibility of different things that they would put into it.
So
That's it.
Sarah, technically speaking, it's a house.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
it's
yeah, definitely.
the house that
John D. Gallup was born in 1730. The house was 1736. John Dean Gallup, the family came over in the 1600s, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So it serves as a source of revenue for the town. We had been getting monthly rent from the people that were living there, which is why I say it's a house. And once all of this work is completed, the town wants to be able to rent this out again, whether it's for home use or some sort of accessory, whatever is allowed through zoning. So we need to complete this conditions assessment and feasibility study we would like to complete this prior to putting it back out to rent. We did do an RFP for people that were interested in renting the property at the very beginning of COVID, when we really don't feel anyone was looking to move anywhere, whether it was their business or their home. So the timing on that we think was just not the best. So now we'd like to get this completed within the 2-month time frame that Nita's discussing, so that we can turn around and get someone in there renting, so we can get that back on the revenue stream for the town.
Right.
Understood. Thank you for catching me up.
All right.
Caroline, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Caroline, I wasn't looking up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, so the second part of it was for conditions assessment and feasibility study? Is that what you were saying? You spoke so fast, so you said that there was a second part, there was 20,000 for the house itself, and
No, the
No.
20,000, there are two separate additional appropriations. One is for the John Dean Gallup House, the SHPO grant, and the other is for the technical assistance for the housing plan. That's $4,500, again, a grant. It's on the additional appropriation request that was part of your packet.
Okay, 45. Okay, thank you.
I think Brett has a hand.
Go ahead. Brett?
I think his connection is not the,
Hi, with the
Brett?
$4,500, can you hear me?
barely, your connection is not great.
One. Okay, stream
Brett,
now, and the shut
Hear
off.
us when that's,
Okay. Is that,
No, you keep cutting out. I don't know if it's better to call.
I
from your
just switched devices.
Okay.
Is that better?
yeah, we got you.
Just question about the $4,500 for the housing plan. Is that
Go ahead.
affordable housing? Is it only earmarked for this plan?
This is a $4,500 contract with the South, it would be when we sign it, the $4,500 contract with the Southeastern Council of Governments to do the technical writing part of the housing plan. So getting the statistics that land use needs to complete this plan.
Okay. Has that in the past gone through planning and zoning line item, or has it always been through the affordable housing?
I would not be able to speak to that. You'd have to ask Juliet.
Because my only question is if she's the one doing the full project and it's not planning and zoning or under their commission, would it make more sense to do it under just straight planning and zoning?
It's part of the Affordable Housing Committee's work, so that's why it's going under affordable housing.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on these two appropriations? All right, I would move that we approve the appropriation for $4,500, grant funds for technical assistance for the affordable housing plan.
So-
And that would go to line item B 34.09.
I second
moved.
that.
Mike, was that you, second?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, if I can poll you on this, Ann? Sarah?
Yes.
Caroline? Your vote, Caroline?
Yes,
And Mike Anderson?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So that's 6-0-0. That's something that can happen right away, simply because it's under the $20,000 cap. Okay? All right, the next motion, I would make a motion to approve the appropriation for $20,000 to be used grant funds for condition assessment and feasibility for the Dean Gallup House, John D. Gallup House. Do I have a
Second.
second? Any other discussion on that? And this is something that would have to go to a town meeting. Caroline?
I just didn't know if you had to approve that, like pending approval of the town.
We can approve it, but the assets cannot move until it's approved by the town.
Dan, I have a question.
Yes, Sarah?
So it's coincidentally because of the policy you asked Paul and I to review. I was reviewing section 7.348 of the town or the state statute. In the way that I read it, so I just don't, I'm not qualified to interpret this, but the way that I read it is that if the grand list for the town is under $20 million, appropriations made by the Board of Finance cannot exceed $10,000. So I don't know if I'm completely reading that wrong, but and I could send it off to somebody who needs to review it, but it's just something I happened to have read yesterday.
Yeah, our grand list is roughly at 523 million.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I could believe that with a much smaller grand list, that the cap was going to be lower,
Yeah.
just based on what you just read. So,
Okay. Thanks.
any other discussion? Okay, if I can poll you, Ann? And Sarah?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
And myself will be a yes. Again, passes 6-0. And again, this particular item will have to go to a town meeting. Okay.
I have this one for you to sign. This is
Okay.
also the one
Just
that
say
Mike
okay,
signed,
yeah.
so.
All right. Moving on to agenda, thank you. Agenda item number 4, just reports. You would have gotten the profit loss for general government, and you would have seen almost caught up on Board of Ed, July and August. We did not have a tax report submitted.
I sent it today,
Oh,
midday,
so maybe I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
so Karen was able to get that together.
Oh, good. What'd that look like? Was it good?
Yeah.
Oh, you got a copy. Okay, so if you've reviewed that, and this is always important information, year-to-date collections is at 53.38%. So as you know, as we get into the new calendar year, January, we have another wave of collections. So my assessment would be she's on track. Any questions on any of that material? Okay.
Brett has his hand up.
Go ahead, Brett.
I just have a question. I'm just, it kind of goes back to the middle school comment earlier, whether who has control of that building at this point and the expenses until that building gets leased out. I know it wasn't budgeted in the selectmen's. So is that budgeted somewhere in the Board of Ed's budget here? So when we look at
No,
financial statements, it's anywhere?
The town is currently paying the bills. The Board of Ed will give a portion over for their portion, but the technical process of turning the building over to the town has not been completed.
Okay, so the municipal side is paying the bills right now. And where does that come out of in the budget?
We are currently paying them out of highway because they are the only budget large enough to absorb that cost. So we are paying that out of B27.10 town property maintenance because technically it's town property maintenance.
That's true. All right. And do we know what that monthly expense is now?
No, the bills are still fluctuating and we're still getting a handle on it.
Okay. Will that hurt us if we have a bad winter, pulling it out of there?
No, that's not the line that the overtime comes out of for snow removal.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline? You
Do we
recognize?
know, yeah, do we know how much you've had to pay so far out of that line item?
So the report that I sent you guys says that we've paid $13,957.31 as of September 30th.
So that's from July 1st through September 30th.
Yes,
And that's only for the middle school.
it's for 298 Norwich Wesley Road.
Yeah, which includes administrative offices and the
There's
two-story.
two
piece.
gas bills, one electric bill. What else have I moved over?
So is that lease rental in there too, that the Board of Ed pays? Does that go into a certain line item? For that square footage charge?
So that will come in as revenue.
Right.
So that will not come out of there. That will be paying all the bills on that side, but when we get the check from the Board of Ed, that'll come in on our revenue side.
Okay.
And there was some question about the lease and this and that. The update is that still an interested entity and a lease being negotiated.
Currently under negotiations, nothing can be discussed.
Are you talking that, I mean, you're looking at 2 months now, so you could figure that, so we're gonna be paying at least 6 times the 13,957, one can assume at least.
I don't want to make any guesses.
Okay,
We're trying to do some things to make the building more energy efficient so we can cut back on some of the bills. We honestly don't know what it's going to be. So
well, we were trying to get this information long before the project was complete, and it was known that the town was going to assume responsibility for that building. And we could never get that information. It was never made available to us, even as the Board of Finance.
I agree. It's not something that the town has. So if I had it, I'd give it to you.
Yeah, this is something, we're going to have another look at as we progress and piece this all together. And what we're looking at essentially is, okay, this facility, what's it costing the town versus what's the offset on potential revenue, both from Board of Ed and a leasing entity.
Dan, when would you get a little nervous that we don't have a lease in place and we're having unbudgeted expenses? Is there a point where you get a little nervous where we have to really figure something out?
Well, as we get into cold weather, obviously the cost of maintaining the building goes up. So we've been pretty fortunate so far. But from the August timeframe, I've been getting very positive notions as to an entity moving forward. And I guess negotiations are ongoing. Attorneys are talking to each other. So I would think within 30 days, this is wrapped up. Based on that.
Because if you do the math, you're talking about, $84,000 just for a year, just based on that, with the building empty. And when we talked last year, they had only budgeted, I think, 40,000.
We haven't budgeted anything, Carolyn. We cut that when we had to make cuts to the.
I realize that now. I mean, but just for talking purposes, that's what you came in with, was 40,000 as an estimate.
That wasn't a realistic estimate. It wasn't based on anything. It was putting a number into the budget.
Okay.
What is the revenue from the school? Do we know how much they pay?
They have budgeted, I don't have the exact number, but I think it's $17,000, a little over that was what they had put into their calculations in their budget.
For the year?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, as you know, they've only got, they've been using this space as well as just
I want to say they're
three
using
offices.
around 8,000 square feet. So when you look at the total picture of the school, it's not even 10%, maybe a little over 10%. So, if you're looking at a utility bill, and this was all calculated prior to knowing this is a 1-year agreement with the Board of Education that they'll pay this amount. And then once everything is officially turned over to the town, we'll have an actual formal document agreement with them of what they're paying.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay,
I do agree that this is an issue. We're working on it. Which is why we're trying to get a entity into lease. So as Dan said, we do still have an interested party, so hopefully that will move forward.
the next agenda item is number 5, and just giving you a reval update. So this is kind of an important issue that started very early or late winter this year, and now is coming to conclusion. So all of the properties have been assessed by the reval team, and right now they're going through building permits. So anyone who pulled a building permit, they go back and look at, okay, is it an addition, a garage, a shed, whatever, of which there are 60. So that will be part of their calculus. But I'm happy to tell you that we're looking probably close to 9% increase on the grand list, which just for round numbers would be $45 million. So that's a plus. And as we went into the reval, you know, if you remember, I shared with you, I had looked at other towns, particularly our size, that had gone through revaluation in recent times, in the trailing 12 months. And the best I saw was a 3% increase. So most of them were 1 to 3%. And ours, I would have liked to have seen this projected number almost twice that, but I'm very happy as compared to what I was viewing as the reval team started it from other towns as a comparative. But that's great news for us, just great news. So by the time we meet the next time, I should have a lock on what those numbers are. But very positive news. Any questions on that? All right. Just so I'm adding something, so maybe part of your thinking here. If all things were to stay the same in our budget and our grand list increased by 9%, it means that the revenue that the grand list is generating would drop a mill rate by 9% if all things were even. So you could actually look at a mill rate that has gone down as the grand list has increased. Any questions relative to that? All right, on Board of Finance policies, I didn't see anything that came in, but I'm hoping for those who took on assignments for the policies that we defined are working on them. Something is coming out of it. Does anybody want to report anything?
I reviewed the hold on, I don't want to say it wrong. The end of year budget reconciliation policy. I have some notes and some recommendations. I don't know what you'd prefer. I can send it off to the broader team to review, or I can talk
That
about
would
it.
help.
Okay.
Sarah, were you working with somebody as a team member on yours?
Yeah, Paul, but Paul and I didn't get a chance to sync up. So he has the notes, but I don't know what his actual perspective is.
Okay. Once you've got something that you think is a good draft form, bring it to the board.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it. And that would be for everyone else as well. So take the policy reviews seriously. You know, that's something I would love to kind of have made decisions on for the board and have those brought to the town website.
I've been working on the compiling the information for the our non-reoccurring fund, and looking at charter towns, unchartered towns, and what they do. And I made a grouping, but we have not had the chance to talk as a group with Ann and Dan yet. I know
So
everyone's
Ann,
schedule is pretty busy.
with you on that one? Yeah.
So I can try to sync up with them and send over the information that I have, or try to get a
Yeah.
Zoom meeting going. So then we can have something more for you at our next meeting.
Yeah, I see all of them as being important, but that one, you know, I see as a very important piece, so. Great, thank you. Previous minutes. Okay, previous minutes are going to be tabled. And on future strategies, I put in there fiscal year 2019 and 20. I meant to put in 20 and 21. Before we know it, we're going to be back in the midst of budget prep. But an important piece is, you know, what the grand list will be, and that's what we will work off. And there was also a question about what's it look like in terms of expectations from the state. The state has been running a surplus. You know, as I listen to what they have to say, I'm not hearing anything that puts us in crisis mode in terms of a threat to what we might expect from the state. Now, that can change, but we've not had any forecasts as yet from the state. So,
Carolyn has a question.
Caroline?
Do you think that we should put it out to all the departments to find out, I mean, ahead of budget time, rather than just having them come and present their budgets as we normally do? I mean, maybe we should find out now how COVID is affecting all of them, either positively or negatively, in their budgets. It's just a thought, and what they anticipate being challenges, you know, in the future.
Have you
Not
put
sure
out
what
any
anyone else
direction?
thinks about that.
There's no direction that's been put out by Board of Selectmen yet?
No, I mean, we're still working with the grant funding for the coronavirus relief fund and FEMA. So I don't know how much really we're gonna see an impact. Unless it's on lost revenue.
Yeah, it's a good thought, Caroline. You know, I don't know if you were hearing what Christine was saying, but I mean, that's something I would, you know, encourage the Board of Selectmen to take a hard look at, you know, in terms of what can be executed, what can't be executed.
We're not necessarily talking about their budget. I'm talking about the departments and how it affects each department. I was asked to sit in on the Board of Ed meetings, which I did sit on, very two long meetings, and unfortunately I missed 2 of their meetings because they kept adding meetings, and I'm really feeling for them right now, because it's a tremendous time commitment to attend all of these meetings. I don't know if there's a way to view them. I would like to find that out as well. But, you know, I'm thinking about emergency services. I'm thinking about, you know, the school budget. Do you know what I mean? We saw the impacts that last year, the last end of the fiscal year, had on the budgets, but I'm just wondering what's been happening between July and now, and what they anticipate, you know, going forward. If that makes sense to everyone else.
I think there's some, you know, impact there, Caroline. It can't be denied. And, you know, I think the question you're posing is, do we need to have that information sooner rather than in the normal time frame that we would have received it?
I guess to be
And-
clear, I think what happens is we plan these meetings in January or later, and we're on a tight schedule. And so we come down the line and all of a sudden it's like, we have to start cutting here and there. And maybe if we have some conversations now with the people that are affected, at least in a negative way, maybe we would have a better result later, and it wouldn't be down to the wire where everybody's trying to meet at the last minute. Maybe we could have some sort of dialogue.
But Carolyn, wouldn't anything that's COVID related not be something that would be in hopefully the FY22 budget? Because it's not a recurring expense. So if people would need additional funding, shouldn't that be an additional appropriation? Since it's a one-time, hopefully a one-time circumstance, rather than increasing someone's budget permanently because of a pandemic that we're hoping isn't going to reoccur?
I'm not talking about a one-time thing. I'm talking about a change to how business is being done. When we were meeting last year, everyone said, they looked at me and they're like, well, I'm a half glass full person. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a realist. So at that time I said, we are probably going to have another spike in the fall, which we're having as soon as the kids go back to school, which happened. The people from the cities are going to be exiting and wanting what we have, which is also happening. And, it's that sort of thing where, I'm looking at how this has impacted me on a daily basis where I work and how I have to do things. And hopefully it won't be forever, because this is painful. But, I think it's important to have these conversations, because not everybody is working from home and is, I don't know what the right word would be, but, some people are just home and they're not aware of like the impacts that it has on the people actually, with the boots on the ground, doing the work, doing everything face to face, and the impacts of it. And hopefully it won't go on, but I think it would be better to have the conversations rather than not. And that's, again, just my opinion.
Yeah,
I think Carolyn actually has a point. Going forward, I think a lot of business models will change, and not just for business, but for government as well. And so if we can ask our various boards and departments to look at how they think they will be doing business in the future, and if there is a financial cost to that, a heads up might be a good thing.
Nita, from your chair and Board of Selectmen, have you had any sense of a dramatic shift from what we have been through over the last few years in terms of operations and functionality of the services of the town?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me about there. I do know that we had talked about
Does
starting.
everything seem to be operating normally, I guess?
Oh, now, is it all operating normally now? Is that what you're saying? Given what we're in, I think we're doing a terrific job in terms of moving things along. However, what I thought you were going to ask is, we are hoping that we can start the budget this year in late November or early December, and get ahead of things a little bit. And really, I think we've learned that you can't change too many things anyway when all is said and done. Last year we stuck with what we thought the money was going to be, and in terms of what we were going to get, and it was pretty close to what we got and everything. So I think we're going to focus on starting earlier and maybe not having to jam so much at the end. The end is always the big problem, don't you think?
Yeah, I think if I were to just give observation. I mean, I think Board of Ed and their budget probably has had the most impact relative to the COVID situation. And I don't know what quite to expect there. You know.
Right, they have grant funding. I don't know how much it's covering of the expenses that they have. I have not gone to any Board of Ed meetings, and their business manager and I have not spoken about their grants other than what they've submitted to us to submit to FEMA, so.
Well, I know that Bob is going to quite a few of their meetings, which I think is a healthy thing, because then we can keep in touch. And I have suggested that I might go to them too. So, because we did that the first year or so when we first came into office, and I think it's helpful. But I think that the Board of Education has the biggest job to go of anything that we're doing. Tomorrow, something could happen and they'd have to be back with the children back at home and then starting all over again. Hopefully that is not going to happen. We're still lucky right now.
Sarah and then Brett. Sarah?
So Carolyn, I have a question for you. Are you concerned about impact to the 2021-2022 budget? Or are you asking around like this year's budget? Is there potential impact that folks are starting to see or are worried about happening for this year? Or
I'm mostly concerned and thinking about the future fiscal year. I think people are probably trying to just deal with whatever they've been dealt. But at least going forward, I mean, I would think that if they're having an impact now, it could, continue on into the future. And if it's getting worse everywhere around the country, I mean, just a simple like supply and demand. I mean, work in the medical field, we are limited as to how much PPE we can purchase at any one time. So for us, it's very concerning, and it's only getting worse because in other parts of the country, it's surging. So, it's like when everybody ran on the toilet paper in the very beginning, it's the same idea. I mean, no matter what you need to order for supplies, there's trouble with shipping, never mind, the supply chain. And then there's factories that have been shut down that aren't even, they're not making their products. There's all these different things that come into play. So, I mean, to think that just because we're in North Stonington and we only have a population of just over 5,000 people, that doesn't affect our whole town and it could have a significant impact. Mostly, if money can be given back, that's the best thing from going through all the pain that we've had to go through. However, you don't want to be on the other end of it where you're going to be short and because you haven't had these conversations and you haven't really thought about it. And maybe some people haven't thought about it, but maybe we should be thinking about like, what's the plan B going to be? What are the things that we do need to have and, and what are the costs involved? Not just time, but also the money.
Yeah, I have a hard time, other than Board of Ed, thinking about necessarily added supplies. But I do think about, okay, what can be executed versus not being executed. And as we look at the fiscal year 21-22, I would hope by that point we're transitioning out of where we are now. So I think the fiscal year 2021, I'm hoping that we've budgeted appropriately and that, to your concerns, have we missed anything that, might mandate appropriations, for instance, or something that is a kind of a bump that we had not anticipated. So, but, I think as Anita brought out that, not Anita, November and December, but there's no reason why those conversations can't be ongoing either, and that information brought to Board of Finance. Mike, you had your hand up first, and Brett.
I just wanted to go, I reiterate what you just said. If we're going to start the process a little earlier, that kind of assuages the concerns that Caroline has. We're obviously going to be talking to these various entities earlier on in the process. So yeah, I'm all for beginning the budget season a little earlier than normal to really address what your concerns are, Caroline, which is valid, particularly if they're having issues this year. To Sarah's point about with COVID being COVID related, we should know that sooner rather than later to see if there's going to be some kind of shortfall. But let's get it started early in November than we have.
Brett, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a few now that others have gone, but I have to agree with Mike, Sarah, and Carolyn. And if you combine those a little bit, yeah, I think it's important to know where we would be, or certain departments are with COVID going next year. But the way Mike and Sarah just brought it up, I think it's important to know if there has been impact in the current fiscal year. And any of these doubt what their needs might be, or where their shortfalls will come into play. Regarding budgeting for next year, one of my questions is, when do we know, or when we have a better handle on some of the revenues that are going to be coming in? The Winnichog Solar Project, that was a decent amount of income potential for the town. When do we know or have an estimate on those, and when that will is that future years?
I don't have an answer on the Winnichog.
I don't have
project.
any information on that, Brett, sorry.
Okay. And then the second question is, when Board of Ed came in and presented a few and one of the things they seem upset about is not having some kind of range to go on. So they shoot. Can you hear me?
You keep cutting out.
Hello?
Yeah.
All right, I'll
Can
try
you
this one more time. I can hear you guys. The Board of Ed had some issues with, the range of, if we wanted, the Board of Finance saw it as a certain percentage, that they wasted time going back and forth. Is that something that should be looked at this year, and talking with them early and trying to come up with that percentage range that they should try to fall into, so it doesn't go back and forth like it did last year ahead of time? It's a tough one, but I know that was some of the comments from the last budget cycle.
I'm hoping not to to have it develop, but I mean, they are in a year where it's very fluid in terms of, designing, what they think is going to be an appropriate curriculum for the COVID period. I know they're going to bring everyone back in November, but what has happened during this fiscal year that maybe they didn't even foresee as we brought their budget forward, or they brought their budget forward. And again, are we going to be looking at the same thing as we get into the next fiscal year for the Board of Ed in terms of the pandemic? I mean, I don't know, but I certainly would like to know within the budget currently, and at least as you're looking at profit loss, they're handling it, but has there been something there that has been an anomaly based on the pandemic that is more than they'd ever even thought of in terms of expense? So, Sarah?
So having not gone through the review cycle before, does the Board of Finance dictate a template or a set of questions that they want each person or each department bringing a budget? Do they dictate something like this so it's a little bit of a consistent format? Or does each department just bring their budget and kind of speak to it how they would?
Yeah, they bring their budgets forward with backup in terms of, okay, this is why we need what we need. And the review period, we're asking questions of them relative to, okay, what about this? What about that? And in terms of Board of Ed, that's the largest piece of the budget and most critical. So, I mean, we had a lot of conversation going back and forth where they had to make some compromise.
I remember that part. I'm curious. I'm just wondering out loud, right? If we could, if it would be helpful, if there was a set of questions or a set of points that we would want everyone to address first, like tell us what your last year's budget was, tell us what this year's budget is, tell us why it's different, tell us if you have any specific COVID, impacts, kind of to get to Carolyn's point. And they would still bring their budget forward however they normally do and share it. But the first opening would or should be consistent from every single department so that we're reviewing and ingesting the material in sort of a consistent, structured way. Maybe it's not an issue, but I'm just curious.
I don't see that as a bad thought, to kind of combine some of the things that we're talking about. What you're suggesting is they come in with a little bit of a snapshot to start, that's been standardized, and then for them to bring in justification.
And we would dictate the snapshot, like what we wanted it to look like.
Mike Anderson?
Nita, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that Joe Gross talks about this all the time. Isn't there don't all your departments come in with basically a synopsis of how many employees do they have? What's the, how do they justify all this and yada, yada, yada in the department, and they present those budgets to you. Isn't that correct? So, I mean, because Sarah, that's a good point, but we don't necessarily dictate, the line items. And so it's kind of, these different departments report to the selectmen as to, here's who we have, here's who we need, here's the equipment, here's the gas, here's the, if it's for the emergency services, they have, here's the PPE we need, PPE we need, here's, all this, whatever. They actually do kind of report all those things to the selectmen, and that's how the selectmen kind of divide their budget. Is that correct?
Not totally, because remember last year, one of the things that we decided to do was not make, let's say, the highway department to have to come in and do their whole presentation twice, once to us and then once again to you all. So we tried to do things so that we could be hearing some things together, not separately. And do you all remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hadn't done a big look at them before that. And then when if there were things that weren't liked, then we would bring some of the people back again. But we may go ahead.
I think Mike is referring to the assessor's office, the tax collector's office, the town clerk, the people that don't come, not the fire company, not EDC, not land use, not the highway department, but all the smaller departments that don't come in and do their own standalone presentation, but the ones that are just kind of included in the selectmen's budget that, I'm collecting that information from them and putting everything into OpenGov, and then the selectmen are looking at that on paper instead of having the town clerk physically standing here saying why she needs more money.
But
right, Mike?
Yeah. But in fact, those things that you're talking about, I agree with what you're saying, Christine, but those usually don't have big problems associated with them at all, would you say? The ones on, they're pretty straightforward. It's there or it's not there.
Yeah, I would say the ones that we do presentations are either larger budgets or budgets that people have more questions about. So,
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily implying that we get in the middle of whatever the selectmen processes for reviewing their budgets. It was more, the larger, the higher level. But I don't understand it enough yet. So I was just more curious.
I think, if I may, Dan, I just think that, for those bigger budgets, we kind of, in combination with the Board of Selectmen last year, just had them come in and we told them, this is what we want you to present. And so, that it is happening. And
Right.
but for those smaller budgets, the Board of Selectmen really have, control over the minutia there.
Brett?
Yeah, since we're talking about future strategies and a little bit of everything, I guess, one of my questions is, when I look through the profit and loss or for the months or the end of the year, is there any way to get the Board of Ed to provide a little more detail? If you compare the municipal side to the Board of Ed side, it's night and day. The Board of Ed, which is a much larger budget, it's kind of like reading an outline without any bullet points. So is there any way where they can provide a little more detailed profit and loss or even at the end of the year, just when you compare the two, there's not much information on the Board of Ed report.
Well, we give Board of Ed total discretion to their budget. So I have to front in my comments with that. And what we're looking for is, an execution of their budget relative to what they gave us as they came forward for approval. And I'm not sure what more they could provide. If you could give me an example.
Well, I guess it's more consistency too between the two budgets. So if you go look at the Board of Ed budget and look at the Selectmen's budget, originally when it's prepared, there is more detail in the Board of Ed budget, but the copies and everything else that we see, mostly it's not broken down. And if you look at the financial statements, it'd be nice to see the breakdown under these line items of, expenditures for utilities, for the buildings, for any of it, like the municipal side. It's just, if you're trying to compare and just look at everything, it would be a lot easier if they were similar.
We're going to same software for accounting. So, maybe that presents something.
Well, that probably would help.
I would expect from Board of Ed, quite frankly.
You'd have to have the Board of Ed chair agree to do it. I don't have any access to their software. I see the same reports you guys do. We use QuickBooks, they use Infinite Vision, so I don't know what the reporting is that they have capability to do. I just know this is the profit and loss that we run from QuickBooks.
Right. Do you understand what I mean about the differences in detail, Christine?
I completely understand. I just don't, it would have to be your chair to the Board of Ed chair making that request.
I can talk to Christine Wagner about it and see what they're looking at, versus what they're giving us. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think that at the board, I could be very wrong, but I think that
They're
they're
looking at
seeing
the
this
same
exact
thing.
same report you guys are seeing at their
I think so,
meetings. I
too.
don't know that they get
But I'll
more-
address it with her, for
more of
sure. Yeah.
a detailed
You
view.
know, relative to budget prep, and I think this is important for anyone on the Board of Finance to understand and beyond, is that I personally see our budget, you know, as a blueprint for having an efficient, effective execution of services expected by our townspeople. But the part I think is most important is that it have a strategic element. So I really see a budget as a strategic planning tool. And so I've encouraged the selectmen heretofore to come up with a mission statement, per se, as to what this budget intends to provide. And I think and I can give examples. I mean, in part it's happening, but it needs, I think, more clarity that, you know, if we're moving towards water and sewer, okay, what is in the budgets that would lend itself to meeting those goals? So, you know, I think you can use the budget to actually demonstrate how are we moving towards meeting priorities that have been set by the Board of Selectmen. Caroline?
It would be nice to compare year over year. So if you could look back on both budgets year over year and compare them so that you could see, you know, patterns and, you know, highs and lows, and you can have conversations about what caused those. I mean, it would be nice if they used QuickBooks, or if everyone used the same software and the reports were the same with the same account numbers, so that, you know, it would be easy to see, you know, what your utility expenses are, or what, you know, whatever you have broken down into those items. Just, I mean, not to say that you could change anything, but it would be good to know, like, where are those dollars going, and if there is a pattern, or, like, you know, and like I've always said, I mean, if you know the information, then you can talk about maybe ways to save money. You know, different people have different ideas, but if the information isn't made available, then there's no way to have those conversations.
Well, I think in part that's why we have the software up to this point that we do.
Well, the school upgraded their software. There wasn't money on the town side to do that. Where it may be included in the budget for next year. We're just not there yet. So. But they will not go to QuickBooks. QuickBooks, the software they use is a much better software than we're using for our side. And with the standardized accounting that they have to use as a school within the Department of Education, they have to have that level of software for their reporting. So,
Yeah, and the notion of being a strategic tool, and it happens in part through the annual report, which is also in here. But I'd like to have the townspeople see what the budget did for them in any one fiscal year. What was accomplished? You know, what became a reality, or what was provided because of the budget, proper budget execution. Sarah, you had your hand up?
Oh, I'm glad you came back to it, because I really like that point. I think it's really important to understand, like, the goals. And I honestly think Board of Ed might have a similar, you know, I think fundamentally COVID changes us long term, right? And so they may have to look at strategies this coming year that they've never had to think about as well. So I think it makes it easier for us to understand how to interpret what we're looking at, you know, line item by line item, is knowing what the overall goals are. So I think that's great.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, Board of Ed just recently did a strategic plan. Okay. And what happens is they develop a very nice document and it gets put on a shelf, essentially. What I would like to see is, relative to budget planning and budget execution, how is it integrated to the strategic plan. And what are we trying to invest in? What are we trying to move towards? And then do a recap or summary of what has been accomplished relative to that strategic plan. I mean, we have to, we're essentially doing it, but I think we need to bring clarity and definition to marrying strategic plans to the budgets. That's what I'd like to see us move to. Any other comments? Right, I think it's good discussion. I hope Board of Selectmen, I'll talk to Mike about it, but Nita, I mean, you can kind of provide, some of the things we've been talking about to Board of Selectmen. Annual reports, I'm hoping they're being worked on. I don't know what the status is at this point.
Several departments have turned them in.
Okay.
Many more have not.
Yeah.
They're not due yet. So I'll send out an email reminder to those who have not submitted.
Yeah, so I mean, for quite a few years, I've done the narrative for our annual report for Board of Finance, but I usually do it on the heels of having had an audit report. And we're probably not going to see our audit report for the last fiscal year until December at this point. Yeah. Mike?
That's what I was talking about, the annual report. Doesn't all departments provide information for the annual report?
They're supposed to.
Right, so that's
They
kind
don't
of,
all.
I know, but we need to get them to do that, to Sarah's point, this is the information that they give us to figure out, are they even necessary? Do they have employees, the proper employees in place and what have you, to justify what they're doing. That's the start of the budget season, is to get the annual report from these people, from each department, right?
Right. The only group that did not submit last year was the Ambulance Association. Everyone else that was asked for one did submit one.
Okay. Well, that's where we start. Well, at least the selectmen start, and
Yeah,
to Joe.
that's why
Sarah. This is the very first time, and I remember like I was in the same exact position you were, whatever, 3 years ago. That it was like, how do we even do this? And and Joe Gross, who's always been very involved in this process, brought up the point right away. Like, you guys got to look at these annual reports and to find out, do they have the right staff? Do they have enough staff? Do they have too many staff? Do they, these guys have to justify their own budgets, and part of it is to do the work in these annual reports that are quality and provide you with the proper information as to what they're doing. I'm off my soapbox.
And for the Ambulance Association, kind of like a cringe on my side is that, in our budget, we're providing them roughly $500,000 a year for their operation. Not to mention what we have placed in equipment to provide for them. So certainly I'd like to know, okay, what's going on?
The deadline for submission is November 16th, in case any departments go back and watch this recording. November 16th, your annual reports are due. Thank you.
Caroline?
I know, and I can't recall exactly who said this, but they suggested that perhaps if people don't provide information for the annual report, then they shouldn't be funded. I don't know if you can do that or not, but maybe that
Joe Gross said it.
Joe
Gross said it.
Maybe that would motivate somebody.
I did allude to that in the request for it this year.
I think it's only fair, if you're asking for money from the town, that you provide information back. I don't think anybody's too busy that they can't do that, especially in the time, if they know it's every single year. It's just one of those things that you have to do, just like paying your taxes. You just have to make time for it.
Yeah, and as I have suggested before, is that, most everyone is making a submission for the quarterly newsletter. Well, as you put the 4 quarters together, you really have a strong basis for the narrative for the annual report. So it should be easy.
Well, that's because Nita and Lisa twist your arm until you they get their quarterlies.
Don't say too much.
Well, it's good to know, Dan, that, when we have a meeting with the volunteer fire department and EMS, they come in together and EMS hasn't presented the annual report, then we got to get on them about that. You're asking us for additional funds in your budget and what have you, but you're not putting in the work. This is what we require. You have to justify your job.
I think we put a lot of trust and confidence in, as we are funding these entities within the town, that they are doing the right thing. But from the Board of Finance side, we're just looking at numbers and we may not have full understanding of, okay, what are the needs? What's not working? Doesn't mean that we review them, but, certainly I think we have to have a notion that things are happening as are expected. Yes, Ann.
Is it stated in any town policy that these departments have to provide an annual report?
The annual report itself by town is a mandate
By statute.
by statute.
So we actually have grounds to enforce it.
Yes.
Hey, Dan,
Yes, Brett.
with our audit process and our auditors, they don't audit the EMS because they're private technically, even though we fund them, the ambulance and fire, but they don't get audited through our system, correct?
They-
Audit report, though.
They have their own independent auditor that comes in because they're not, they're both nonprofits. So they have their own independent auditor that comes in and takes care of it. From the town's perspective, they are a vendor. So we are giving them a check because they are a vendor and it's up to them how they expend those funds.
Okay.
Is there another question there? I thought I saw another hand. Okay. All right. Again, I think great discussion. And again, the annual report can be another link up to, the strategic planning that the town is doing. Kind of to the point that I was making earlier. What's been accomplished. And you don't want all these entities within the town to be silos. I mean, we're all linked and should be moving towards essentially assumed recognizable goals that everyone can agree upon. All right, agenda item number 9, more public comments. Is there anyone on public that would like to make a comment?
Go ahead, Joe.
You hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
This has got a different screen. I have a couple things here though. Dan, we keep reporting that school project is coming under budget. Yet,
Yes.
when it comes time to do the demolition of the middle school, there is no money there. So it didn't come under budget. But I do believe in renting them out and talking with Chris, who was very helpful to me, that if we have them funds from 3-year rental, there will be money to do the demo if we decide to do it then. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes or no?
one, I would go, it's not a clear yes or no. In terms of me saying that the project came under budget, yes, we had originally intended to do the demolition of the middle school. However, it was left as an alternate and
It wasn't
approved
an
by the
alternate?
town. Yes, it was. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna show you the budget, the thing that was on the agenda. And that was on the agenda when I voted with it with the rest of the item. Not an alternate. No, it was not, we gotta clear that one, Dan, please. That was not an alternate. I got the paper right in front of me, which states exactly what I voted on at that town meeting. And that was part of it.
The other thing, Joe, is that as we got into the rehab of the elementary school,
I understand that.
that we knew had biohazard circumstances, that it was much worse than what we had estimated, as we began to peel it back.
I understand that. That's what put us in the hole whenever we got all that stuff that came with the elementary school. The thing I talk about, I feel here, and I'm listening to everybody, but Carolyn when I listen to everybody talk, they're talking the right thing. The budget of the town is not a 3-month process. It is a 12-month process. To get you to the 3 months where it goes smooth, you got to have the earlier stuff in there. What Brett has mentioned, I agree with him 100%. You're looking for the stuff that's there, but you got to get it out to them, the boards and commissions in a format that you understand it. In other words, you get the Board of Ed budget, you get the Selectmen's budget, and they are different. Yet when I go to the meetings, you send it back 20 times to get more information. If we had the format right now and said, this is the way you're going to present the budget to us, and this is the information that's going to be on it, you'd be able to go through it in a simple process. I think that's what everybody's saying. And we should look at some of them other strategic things there. I look at next year's budget. I look at what's existing from this year, and then plus the stuff that we've dumped into next year and the stuff that's coming out in the future years, how it's going to affect it. But nobody looks at that, Dan. I mean, I can tell you what next year's budget's going to be. And if you look at what we put into it, never mind the normal process, normal items that are in our budget for next year, all the additional stuff that we've added to it, man, we really got a lot. You guys got a hell of a job to bring that budget into something. It's going to be a big task for you. But yet that knowledge is here, and we don't look at it until that 3-month process. And then I watch every board go back frustrated as hell, especially I know the Board of Ed does. Well, I wish they'd asked me the first time. I agree with them. Any information you want, you can get. I get the detail of the Board of Ed budget, and they work very well with me. The only thing I don't get from everybody is the actual pay checks to go out so I could see what's there. And if you looked at now, like Mike mentioned, that process is there. You could tell the way they're going and everything that's in there. And you can see it coming in. They get money here, they transfer it to somewhere else. And yet the other things are under budgeted and stuff like it's all there for us, but we don't go through it throughout the year. I'm sorry if I'm probably just explaining things too much to you, but I think we got to process the budget's a 12-month deal, not a 3-month. And Dan, I'm going to show you that thing that I did vote on in that alternate, because I know Chris proved to me, she told me it was an alternate vote too, and no, it wasn't. My thing shows it was on that board, that budget thing I voted on. I thank you.
And what's the date of that?
You got a hell of a job what you're doing.
Right, I would look forward to it, happy to review it with you. I've been sitting on the school modernization project committee, as well as Mike Anderson. And I think for the budget, the overall budget we had, we have got an asset that we can be proud of.
I
Even
agree.
if the old still exists. So,
I agree with that comment. I don't say no. I agree with it all the time. And I attended one board meeting and I said I wouldn't have to attend any others because I felt it was under control. And that other thing, the elementary items that came up, the PCBs and all that, that killed us. And all our money went to that. lot of it, where we would have had the money to do the demo. I understand that. So what I'm saying, we couldn't come under budget because that thing killed us, and we never went back and got more money to take care of that stuff. That stuff was not in the original budget. You're absolutely right. I think we're saying the same things, though. I thank you again.
Oh, it's
Don't
always
get
good to hear
frustrated
from you,
with
Joe.
me. Just-
Enough first. No, never. No. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate your contributions.
Okay,
Yeah, good of the cause. And I don't see any other public on, right?
Nope.
No, okay. Joe, you have represented the public
Motion to
tonight. And we hear a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
From Ann? And I would say it's probably unanimous. So thank you, everybody. We'll call the time at 8:27. Thanks. Work on your
Thank you. Have
policies.
a, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, John Boy. We got to bring it back. Come on.
Hey,
Good night,
you should
Mary
see
Ellen.
I coach soccer. He is fierce. This guy right here, Mike Anderson. Wow.
I got a T-shirt from my team last year. It says, I'm not yelling. It's my soccer coach voice.
Yeah, I've heard you yelling. I hope you get a winning team. Got a winning team?
We have a team with some good skills that are failing to hit the ball into the net.
It's just about them having a good time. That's the most important part.
Oh,
It's
don't
true.
say
We're
that.
having a blast. We're all having a